Talent development leader. For years, you have trusted ATD to develop your team. Now ATD is elevating its content, communities, and capabilities to develop you. Talent development leader is ATD's brand for your professional development, providing content that fosters and promotes your thought leadership, community that progresses with your career, and capabilities backed by ATD's capability model that keep you on the leading edge of the field. Welcome to ATD's Talent Development Leader podcast, featuring monthly conversations with the greatest influencers in the talent development field. We cover the latest trends, hot topics, and future-focused ideas that current and aspiring TD leaders need to know. Learn more by visiting www.td.org and searching for Talent Development Leader podcast. Today, we are talking about the new hire experience. Joining us to share his expertise and insights on the topic is Arun Bedi. Arun joined Visa in 2014 in Asia Pacific, leading its regional client engagement strategy. He executed the rollout of global L&D training tied to the organization's leadership principles. Recently, he led all sales learning and leadership development for Visa in North America. He is currently focused on helping organizations develop a coaching culture. Mr. Bedi has shared his thought leadership and expertise in this area at leading HR conferences, including the Conference Board and with SHRM. In addition, Mr. Bedi is a senior fellow at the Human Capital Institute of the Conference Board, delivering the value of its insights to the membership. He facilitates online leadership programs at Cornell for its executive education curriculum. And he serves as an advisory board member for the USC Marshall Executive Education Program. Prior to Visa, Arun was with PayPal in sales enablement and with Dell Computers, where he helped to develop an integrated go-to-market strategy for emerging markets. Before Dell, he was with Cisco Systems in the client-facing strategic consulting practice. Mr. Bedi graduated from Cornell University with a BA and an MBA. While at Visa, he pursued his master's in HR at Cornell, awarded July 2023, with an emphasis on leadership development. Hi, Arun, and thank you for joining me.
Yeah, great to be here, Anne. Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to start by setting some context for our conversation on the new hire experience. According to recent research by Gartner, more than 50% of candidates who accepted a job offer this past year backed out. According to HBR, 90% of candidates who exited a job process said it was due to a poor hiring experience, meaning too long, too many interviews, they were ghosted, not because of a job mismatch. And Gallup says that employees are more than 3 times as likely to strongly agree that they had an exceptional onboarding experience when their managers had an active role in the process, and they have a 50% greater retention rate. So I'd love to talk a little bit about this research to kind of kick us off. Have we been seeing similar trends for years, or are these data new, kind of evidence of some new shifts taking place recently, perhaps workplace disruption, talent management transitions, so on and so forth? Would love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, those statistics are pretty staggering, right?
Yeah.
But actually, those trends have been there for a while. And they're not often talked about. But the stats, as you and I see, do show, right, that talent management practitioners, as talent management practitioners, we do need to focus on this new hire experience. That 50% figure of attrition before starting is relatively well known. It's been high for a while. The 90% figure of the poor hiring experience is also not really a surprise. Especially with some of the tech-enabled services, losing personalization of the experience. So, for example, I was recently doing some work with Cornell, and being a graduate at Cornell, they hired a background check company to validate that I graduated from Cornell, which was okay, but the process took 3 weeks. So I think there are some areas where that tech can be a little bit more curated. And then sometimes there's managers that when they have a talent acquisition organization, they sort of abdicate their responsibility of the new hire experience to TA, which I think is wrong personally. I think it's a team effort. I think that maybe what has changed overall is socialization of this core experience, right? Now, new hires, who exited the job process, are actually sharing their poor experience on social media, where in the past they didn't have an avenue to do so. And so, if you look at this, what we call the resentment calculator in inverted commas from the Talent Board website, it estimates that the actual cost to a company of a poor hiring experience has increased dramatically over the past 3 years. Primarily because people are just posting more, right, on Glassdoor, LinkedIn. So basically, your bad experience is being amplified across social channels. But you asked about the trends, and I think what's making it worse is possibly two factors, at least in my mind. One is, millennials and Gen Z don't see loyalty as a value. So I think as they come on board, that has to be that culture of like we value you, and we want to curate your onboarding experience has to be reinforced. And then the second thing is, I think this whole culture of remote work is making it harder to get companies to get their employees to feel included or part of the team. I think it's also indicative that good hiring good talent is a competitive sport, and you actually have to get it right, or you're going to waste resources and even hurt your company in the long run. So one of the key takeaways I think you and I are going to talk about from this research is that the hiring manager has to be intimately involved throughout the process, and that's a really key takeaway. And hopefully, we're gonna talk about more of that in this discussion as we go forward.
I think you make a really interesting point about employee expectation, the shift in employee expectations too. I mean, you mentioned millennials, Gen Z. Curious if there's any kind of on the employer's side, if there's anything there when you think about the new hire experience, knowing that perhaps employees aren't going to be sticking around as long as they used to. And maybe that's okay, right? Maybe that's just how it is now. And there needs to be, again, a shift on the side of the employer or the organization accordingly in the new hire experience or the onboarding process. So yeah, curious for your thoughts on that. And I think we'll get into that too as we're talking about this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we were sharing, the statistics are just showing that, employers just have to take this. It's not, hope is not a plan. They have to actually have a process in place, and we're gonna talk about this, like some of the important considerations to make that experience impactful. And if you like, I can go into a little bit of that on the front end. I think for the company as a whole, they want to make that new hire experience about getting their people productive. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the main goal for companies, and they want to get people engaged as soon as possible. So they can be revenue generating. I mean, that's the point. Yeah. I think for the new hire, right? They want to make sure that they made the right choice to join this company. They're second guessing their own decision. They're leaving something that was relatively safe, coming to some place where it's a leap of faith, and they want to have a sense of belonging at the new company. So I think those two considerations are very important.
I think that's interesting. Time is of the essence, right? For both parties. I think, right, organizations want to get them up to speed, employees up to speed quickly. Employees want to know, all right, I made the right decision here. And this is a place where I can see myself growing, right? Not only just staying, but really growing and developing as a human. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. What companies are doing this really well? So you talked about these important considerations that are critical for new hire experience. Any others you want to mention at this time, and also some kind of case studies or anecdotes of what organizations are doing this super well?
Yeah, I think there are companies that are doing parts of this well, and I'll maybe can share a little bit about what I think those parts are. And then I think I can talk a little bit about some of the technology as well that may be there to help companies improve this experience. So I talked earlier about from the perspective of the company, they're trying to get their employees up to speed as quickly as possible. And then from the new hire, they just want to have a sense of belonging. I think to satisfy both of those, I think a couple of things have to happen. One, which I think is really important, is that there has to be a relatively seamless integration between all the parties involved from the company side to bring that new hire on board. So everyone in that process really should have the new hires first month agenda, for example. It's like a play. It needs to be orchestrated well. It's not just TA, it's the hiring manager as well as the onboarding team. And it's really critical that nobody drops the ball in that integration. And then the second thing is, I think it's really, people forget that it's not just it's just not just the getting somebody on board, but it's the before, it's the during, and then it's the after process. And I really can't stress that enough. So the pre-boarding, is really important to get right. Welcome events, even getting compliance stuff out of the way, right? Importantly, having the person, the talent acquisition group, tell the new hire why they need certain documents, not just send them a list of things, right? Even like the I-9 form, for example. So it indicates to them when they're going to get their first paycheck, and it just sets some really important expectations. So that's sort of the pre-boarding piece. And then during, it's so important to set up, introduction meetings, even getting the introduction email right, like welcoming somebody, explaining a little bit about their background. It's scary how few managers get this right. Even spelling the new hire's name right, or even pronouncing their name right. I mean, it's scary. Just even the basics. How would you feel joining a company and your manager got your introduction email wrong? So I would even go so far as to offer professional headshots for people that are coming in if you are going to include a picture. So then the process afterwards is just as important, right? You want to get feedback on it. You want to have check-ins with the new hire. You want to ensure the onboard training happens, right? It's not just sort of, hey, it's on your calendar, and perhaps even think about having a coach or a mentor. For some companies that can do that. We've used BetterUp in the past as a coaching company, as a partner. And then even thinking about putting that onboarding experience on the manager's performance review, because when you actually put it on their performance review, they're gonna pay attention. So that there's a few things you can get right, sort of before, during, and after. Lastly, really think about making that process, that new hire experience, fun and easy and customizable. Because if you don't, it's going to feel like a chore, right? So for the new hire, make finding things for them easy. Like, it shouldn't be a treasure hunt to find things in your company, right? So I would even think about, and we didn't do this, but I was thinking that you should even think about having a special IT hotline for new hires. I think I spent hours on the phone with IT getting my computer set up. So why not just have an IT hotline? Otherwise, you're spending a lot of time, wasting time waiting for IT to get back to you, or they're not available. Maybe introduce new hires to employee resource groups or a special interest they have. Get them a mentor, as I kind of mentioned earlier. One thing I thought was really important is, really sweat the small stuff. Like, if you're going to send a welcome pack and you're going to send some swag to a new hire, make sure it's good swag. There's nothing worse than getting crappy swag. And I used Arc'teryx as a brand of hoodies, just made it really good. So people that think like, hey, I'm being valued. This is good stuff. And any other stuff that you're going to use to share your culture, right? Not just an employee handbook. That's, to me, is like the worst thing to send to somebody as a welcome. On the talent acquisition side, there's even little gestures that you can do, like personalized thank you notes to those who provided references to the new hire. I mean, that really, really and the person who provided the reference will even tell the new hire, oh my God, I got this written hand note from talent acquisition saying thank you for the reference check. That just makes that new hire feel like, oh my God, this company really thinks I'm special. And they took the time. Some companies even, welcome the whole family of the employee, right, to the new company. Show them even the campus or where they're going to work. So there's lots of things that you can do to personalize it, make it fun, make it easy. Um, I know that, for example, some companies go out of their way to ask a new hire, "Hey, what are your expectations when you join?" Somebody may have had a bad back, and so day one they have a standing desk, for example. So just check in and say, "Hey, is there anything that we need to do to accommodate you?" As a new hire. You wanted to know about some companies who are doing this relatively well. And I think there are a lot of companies out there doing, like I said, parts of this well. I think, Visa has done this well, Cisco, IBM, but actually not many are doing it all well. They're not getting the integration part right, all of it, and they're not getting sort of the before, during, and after all together. I think some are definitely committed to making this priority, especially because there's a war for talent. So, companies in the tech sector like Microsoft, Uber, and Google are really doubling down on trying to do this well. I think companies who are going to succeed are the ones who are going to get this integration piece right, between the parties involved. And also using technology. I said I was going to come back and talk a little bit about technology. Because there are different technology pieces sometimes you use smart recruiters for the front end, and then you're using, Workday, and then maybe you're using a coaching company. So those companies that are sort of learning to integrate the technologies for the new hires are going to succeed. And even capturing the new hires' skills up front. So there are companies like Gloat, there are companies like TechWolf that help companies capture some of these new hires' experience and their skills, which I think is super important because you're hiring somebody for their experience, and typically we tend to not value that once they've joined. So hopefully that was a little helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think big takeaways for me. I mean, you had mentioned this at the beginning. None of this is an afterthought or should be, right? Overthink, overplan, essentially. And the integration piece is huge, getting all the parties aligned and having this mapped out really clearly. And I don't think many companies take that much time to do all of that. As you said, some are doing parts of it well, but no one's really doing all of it well. So certainly a massive opportunity for our audience of TD leaders who are in charge of this experience for employees. I think it's fascinating. And I'd love to kind of shift and talk about, in particular, so obviously the new hire experience is big. There's a lot there, and I appreciate the really practical considerations and process that you broke down for us. I think that's really helpful for our listeners. Often we know what doesn't work because of failures we've observed or experienced. But when we talk about some keys to effective onboarding, what does work really well?
So I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong, right, with onboarding, or the sort of the back end of the new hire experience. We've talked about the front end, which is getting somebody onboarded. But once they're on board, this is one of my favorite topics to address. I think there's some things to get right that really can make a difference. And so I'm going to just share three in order of priority, because I think 50% of this is once a new hire gets started, it's really key to get the manager buy-in that they go through an onboarding program, and it's a good use of the newbie's time, right? The manager is already probably waited a long time to get this new hire on board, and now they want to get them active. And so you got to do a little convincing to share with the manager that taking another week for this new hire to go through some training is a good use of their time. So we try to promote this as hey, this is a return on your investment, hiring manager, because when that newbie comes back to work, they're going to be far more productive, far more capable, and useful to you. So this is a good use of your time. So think of it from that perspective. And also trying to kind of have this tug of war with the manager that you're not trying to teach this new hire all the specialized skills that the hiring manager wants them to learn, but you want to build some generalist skills and drive critical thinking so that they are able to ask the good questions about how does my work align with what they do to succeed in the company overall. And this is, like I said, this is a constant tug of war with the manager. Um, and the idea is really to get the manager vested and bought in, like, okay, this is a good idea. Once I have this employee, understanding what they do is tied to the success of the company, they're going to have a stronger engagement. They're going to be more vested. And then the last piece is once a manager is sort of vested in the program, really to make sure that no one interrupts this learning experience, right? You want to have a do not disturb sign on the door. The last thing you need is a manager sort of pulling on this employee like, oh my God, I've got this emergency and I need you out of here. So once the manager is bought in, like I said, that's 50% of the challenge, and you're halfway there. And just incidentally, one of the things we did with managers, some of them for the new hire experience, is we helped them to understand what the newbie was going to go through, because some managers didn't even go through a new hire experience themselves. They didn't go through an onboarding program. They're like, what is this onboarding experience? So really getting them vested by even inviting them, say, hey, look, happy to have you. You can attend any part of this program. And by the way, here's the agenda, or even do like a half an hour preview. Like, this is what the onboarding program is going to do, and this is what they're going to learn. So again, getting that manager committed is half the game. I think the second thing is just conceptually understanding and valuing that these are the future leaders of your company, right? They come with experience that's super valuable. And it's really important not to undermine or dismiss it, and understand the skills that they bring. And remember, they're evaluating you as much as you are evaluating them. And so I would encourage those teams that are doing the onboarding that this is not a brainwashing exercise. And I'm sure you know that really keep it real. Like, really emphasize the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they're going to find out anyway, right? So make sure that they see the whole picture. And there are a lot of interactive ways to do this in with games and networking opportunities, and I can share that with anybody who wants to reach out to me. But I think what is super, super critical here is something that we often forget, which is to engage that new hire early, even before whatever you're calling it. We call it the boot camp at Visa, even before that onboarding experience starts. And the reason you want to do this is you want to build anticipation. Importantly, you want to set expectations, but also you want to weed out those who aren't going to be serious about their career, right? You want to make sure that they know what they're going to be in for that week, that it's an intense program, and whatever it is that you're going to go through, that they're committed to it. Because the last thing you need is a lot of no-shows, because you're just wasting a space that could have been used for somebody else. And then lastly, most of you know this, is it's not one size fits all, right? You need to think about a curated program, both for those who are remote, hybrid, those who are in person, and you need to accommodate different learning styles. Some training has to be more white glove, and others, it has to be more asynchronous. So knowing that it's not one size fits all, it's not one program, just keep that in the back of your mind. So hopefully that was helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you mentioned, Aaron, I'm intrigued what Visa does, the boot camp. And I know there's a lot here. I looked at a video, and we've talked about this process before our chat today. So would love for you to unpack for listeners the Visa boot camp. I know it's a 1-week immersive, experiential, high-touch experience, and it mimics a client experience, right? Can you describe it for us? What's the program look like, and why did you design it the way that you did?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. I mean, this is definitely my sweet spot, but like McDonald's, don't want to give away the secret sauce, but overall, I think most people would resonate with the fact that you want to make that experience, immersive. You want to make it relatively intense. You don't want to scare off people. You want to make it experiential, so they feel like that it's a real life experience. At Visa, we wanted to mimic the client experience, so we made it very high touch. And I think a key aspect of the learning, the journey at least, was multimodal. for us, and I'll explain that. So the multimodal was sort of three or four things, key elements. I think one is, and this is controversial. I mean, we wanted to invite real clients, real meaning like actual clients of Visa, for a fireside chat to share the challenges they may face working with Visa. Is controversial in the sense that, like, oh my God, you're going to have clients actually talk to new hires. Aren't you going to scare them off? But actually, it turned out to be a really positive thing. Clients shared their challenges, and they felt like they were now involved in our onboarding process, so they felt privileged to be there to some extent. And also for the new hire, they felt like, oh my God, they're not sort of showing me Visa through rose tinted glasses. I'm actually getting to talk to clients. And for most people, talking to a client, they have to wait a long time before they've even seen a client, especially in a B2B enterprise. So this was a huge success. Having clients come in for short fireside chats, nothing scripted, just just having them in to have a conversation, no presentations or anything or slide decks. The second thing is, it's really key to have what I call rock star speakers, again in inverted brackets. Rock star meaning that they're from the business and they own the roadmap of the topic and the subject that they're talking about. Because, and the way we were able to attract these rock star speakers is we were like, hey, listen, you've got all these great newbies here. You could also look at these as potential hires for your team. So why don't you come and be here for this program, and you get to scope out who you potentially want to hire in the future. So we kind of made this a two-way attraction. And this was really valued by the newbies, right? Because all the speakers really had to make their sessions interactive and engage the audience. And the newbies felt like, wow, these people are taking time out of their day to have senior leaders come here. So this is definitely a good use of my time. And then the last thing we did was, often what happens in these learning experiences, you go to class and then you go to work, and it's like you put the classroom stuff on a shelf or in a part of your brain that you're like, okay, that was great. Now I got to do my real work, right? And often we don't connect the two. Mm-hmm. So what we wanted to do was close that learn-do gap by inviting a few what we called experienced leaders as coaches, that they were there for the whole duration or most of the duration of the program. And they helped to apply in a certain presentation when there were questions, they interjected and helped the new hires learn how they could apply what they were learning to their work. And this was really, really important. They also shared real wins and losses, what happened. So you got a sense of what it's like to be in the trenches. They also led some of the breakout sessions. So this was a really important consideration. And for the, like I said, it's a two-way street, right? For the experienced leaders, what's in it for them? For them, it was a leadership opportunity. They get to put it on their own development plan, and they get recognized definitely for doing this. I can share a couple of other little smaller things that we did. So those were the sort of the critical elements. And again, not giving away the secret sauce. You want newbies to feel like they're learning practical stuff, right? So it's not just about, okay, this is how we do business, et cetera, et cetera. You want them to learn a little bit about how we do presentations here, what are good meetings like, what are poor meetings like, but importantly, how the company makes money, and how to whiteboard for Visa. It was how to whiteboard a transaction. So like, where does a transaction go? So practical stuff that, maybe you could sit around the Thanksgiving table and say, hey, this is what I do. And this is how what I do is tied to how the company makes money. And then when I was talking earlier about the different learning modes, everybody has a different way of learning. So we introduced several different types of ways to learn through, for example, debate. We had something called a fishbowl exercise, where people sat around and we invited a few people to sit in the middle and to share their experiences, case studies, some gamification. And we even use some competitive aspects with the gamification, because some people like that. Obviously, some of the learning is going to be asynchronous. So that was done ahead of time. So you make the classroom time much more valuable. and then a little bit of like sharing the history of Visa to make people feel like they're part of this culture, and that just emphasizes that employee value proposition and also how we got here. I think just a couple of other little things. We've experimented. It's always good to experiment. We've experimented with some simulation, some assessment tools, some mindset initiatives. We're still when we were there, we're just always looking at different ways of learning. But at the end of the day, you want this new hire cohort, right, to kind of leave with a bunch of BFFs that they're connected with, bonded with. They know who to go to for questions, and they feel like they're ready to get started.
That's excellent. There's so much there. I know our listeners, I mean, certainly not everyone works for a visa, but I think there's so much you can pull from that. And I appreciate just the wealth of information, Arun, and just how practical you're getting with this. I think this will help, again, our audience, our TD Leader audience, really apply some of this in their own work. You mentioned throughout this conversation how critical hiring managers are to the process. Curious how you really hit on that with the boot camp at Visa to ensure, the foundation you're building in this onboarding program is continued throughout once they're out of that experience.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, it's 50% of the job is just getting the hiring managers vested in this, so they're not yanking new hires out of the program, or they're forgetting to include them in the program.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a carrot and stick approach, right? You want to get them feel like they're vested, so ask for their feedback, share what the program is, show that there's a real return on investment, so to speak. Like every day you're spending in training is worth X number of days on the job in terms of productivity. Mm-hmm. So it's really about just getting them involved and understanding the value and that it's important use of their time, right? And how when the newbie comes back, they're applying that in their role in some way or another.
Great.
And just getting their feedback on how that's working. I mean, we're always looking to improve the program to be valuable for the managers. And then, as I said, you can always think about including this even in the manager's performance evaluation. Like, how well did they onboard the new hire, and how well was that process mapped out? Because even though it's a team sport, the hiring manager at the end of the day is the one managing the new hire. And we all know we leave managers, not necessarily companies.
Absolutely. And so tell us about some of those results. I'm sure once the boot camp was up and running and cohorts are going through, you're able to even show hiring managers, right? Here's what involvement in this program, participation, ownership will get you. So curious for any of those results from the boot camp.
Yeah, there's a typical okay, we've got the manager vested now, and you use many companies. There's a lag effect, right, between the time the new hire comes aboard, they go through the training. It's not like they're immediately there's immediate success measures. I mean, obviously, you want them to attend the program, so attendance is definitely a critical number. But then you want to think about things like retention at some point, the lag effect. You want to also look at employee engagement scores. And these are sort of typical measurements, in addition to obviously selling this as this is a great return on investment, like we're going to get you more productive. So measure those productivity things. But there are also other softer indicators that you can potentially look at. And one of the things we did was we looked at something we called a referral program. And the referral program was that any graduate of the onboarding program could refer another newbie. And so typically we had sort of, one referral who would be prioritized, and if they were being referred, they could jump to the front of a wait list, right? And so typically we had a wait list for these onboarding programs. Even though we ran it quarterly, there was always a wait list. So if you referred somebody, they got to the top of your wait list. Because obviously, if you're referring somebody, you're investing in them. You're saying that they're going to be actively involved. And like I said, sometimes the wait list was months, and even like I said, even though we ran the program quarterly. So that referral program was important for us as an indicator of okay, are they referring people? Because if they're referring people, then this is a good use of their time. The other is, I think, word of mouth. there is a certain sort of like feeling, right? Like you want to have this feeling like that it's got to be widely believed that the program is a success, and that you can't succeed at Visa if you didn't go through the boot camp, for example. It was kind of like we call a rite of passage to getting somewhere, because it gave you visibility. If we did bring in the rock star speakers, then people who are attending feel like, oh my God, I'm getting that access. I'm getting experienced leaders in the program. I'm getting mentors. I'm getting coaches. Like, this is really good stuff. So there was a kind of a sense that you couldn't succeed at Visa if you didn't do the bootcamp. That's what we wanted at the end of the day. So we always got the sort of, those were our sound bites. And then lastly, I think it was, as I mentioned, it was camaraderie. The cohorts themselves, when they graduate, we don't force them to do this, but they set up their own calls to reconnect, say hi to each other, chat with each other. They have, yearly, photos and just get-togethers. They even invite their experienced leaders to attend, and some even continue with executive coaching that's offered to them. So I think just that camaraderie and knowing that they're part of a cohort. I still have a picture of my onboarding program at Citibank 30 years ago. So there's a sense of like, hey, I was a class of whatever.
Yeah.
And then I think finally, success is also about failing too, in terms of how you design the program. And so you have to constantly iterate. I think we use sort of a human-centered design approach to constantly test and learn, because you're never always going to get it right. And even though you may have the right ingredients, it really depends on the people who are there that make the program. I think one spectacular failure was when during COVID we were working remotely. We had to run these onboarding programs remotely. We were having trouble getting people to join the Teams call or just be attentive. And so we thought about giving them some money to kind of help them be more, to be more attentive during the class. And so we gave them a $500 stipend to like buy lunch, have it delivered, or maybe pay for a babysitter, or do something that got them, to got them more attentive. A lot of them unfortunately took the money and used it for all kinds of other non-related stuff, which was, and they still didn't show up. So, so that was a learning lesson that we needed to be more prescriptive and smarter about. Like, you can't just sort of tell people, hey, this is going to be good for you. So that was a learning for us. But back over to you, Anne.
That's funny. Right. But you figured it out, right? You can't learn those lessons unless we try. And it's also interesting to, kind of showing them the value of what's in it for them, right? Beyond just some of the other incentives. But thank you so much for your time today, Arun. This has been a wealth of knowledge, super practical. I think there's a lot of gems here that our listeners can take and run with, implement in their existing new hire experiences and onboarding programs. And so I encourage everyone listening to please connect with Arun. I know there's a lot more you could say, a lot more you could share. If folks have any questions that we haven't answered today, Arun, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can just email me at abedi888, so ABEDI888 at outlook.com, and happy to answer any further questions and some more context.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Anne. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast by the Association for Talent Development. If you found this show insightful or useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.